everyone, it's Alice, and today I thought we could take a look at this year's long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And I think the long list was announced, can't remember the date, but it was like early March. Now, I've said this before, but I don't usually follow a lot of book prizes. This is the only one that I sort of pay attention to. And it's always exciting to see the long list and like what's on it, because I feel like it's usually a mix of books that I've heard of and I might be interested in, and also a lot of books that I've never heard of before. And if there's anything I'm interested in, I can add it to my endlessly long TBR. This year, I haven't read any of the books on the list, which isn't unusual for me. I think maybe one year I had read like 3, but usually I haven't read any of them. But there are a few on this year's list that I have seen around and I'm already interested in, so I'm very excited to get those books now and read them. But yeah, let's just take a look at the list together and see what we're interested in. Let's start with the ones that I'm actually already interested in. The first one is Wild Dark Shore, which I remember when this came out, I was like, yes, I need to get that and I need to read it. I just haven't done it yet. But it's fiction with a little bit of mystery to it, and it's about this family that live on this very remote island. And I think the island is not that far away from Antarctica. And I think what happens is that, like, they are the only family living on this island, and one day a woman washes ashore, and the family take this woman in, but I think she has some secrets, and it's all a bit complicated. I just think it sounds really good, and I think the setting sounds really good, like the remote island. I wonder what that's gonna be like, and I just really want to read this one, and I've also seen some good reviews for it, which makes me even more excited to read it. The other one I've had my eye on is The Correspondent, and this is one of those books that actually I don't totally know why I'm so interested in it. It's one of those books where I just have a good feeling about it and I think I'm gonna like it. I do know that it's an epistolary novel and it tells the story of a woman who keeps writing letters to the people in her life, and that's sort of how she makes sense of things. And that's all I really know. I think she gets a letter from someone and this makes her take a look at her past or something. I'm not totally sure. It's one of those books where I'm just like, I think I'm gonna like it, so I should try it. I really like books written in letters though, and I don't know. I just think I'm gonna like it. I feel like I'm sort of just basing that idea off of the vibes, and I don't really know where I'm getting the vibes from, but this is one of those books where I don't really want to know too much. I think I'm just gonna get it and try it and see. Moving on to the books that I don't really know as much about, which is basically the rest of the list, we have Gloria Don't Speak, which I feel like I've seen this cover somewhere, but I didn't really know much about the book. But it's about a woman, a quite young woman, I think, who is very lonely, and she spends her days in like the parks around her home, and she looks for friends because there's nothing else to do. And I think she has one friend who is this guy who is unpredictable, seems a little off, and something happens in their friendship. There's like an act of violence, and that tears them apart. And it does mention something about this guy coming out of prison years later, so maybe we meet her later as well, and like what happens with that. I don't really know. This is one of those I'm not super interested in right away. Maybe I'll look up some reviews and see, but yeah, if any of you have read it, I would love to hear what you thought. The next one I'm a little bit more interested in. It's Paradiso 17, which follows a man who's born in Palestine, but he's forced to flee the country. And after that, he basically just moves around a lot. And life takes him to Kuwait, Italy, Arizona, I think, New York, like all over the place. And I think the story is just about the life of this guy. I don't really know why, but that does sound interesting to me. I am usually quite interested in stories that are all about like what home is, and I feel like maybe this might be one of those books. I have also heard that the writing is really good and it's very lyrical, which I can be really into that kind of writing. So I'd be interested to just like try it. Maybe I'll see if I can find it in a bookshop and see what I think of the first few pages. I actually really like the cover for this next one. It's Moderation, and I know I've never seen this one before, at least I think so, because I think I would have remembered the cover because it's really weird and I really like it. I don't know if I'm fully grasping what the story is about. It's kind of like a romance, but it has some sci-fi elements to it. And it's about this woman who is a content moderator, and she gets a promotion where she gets to start working in VR. And she meets a guy, and he has a lot of secrets, and I think she falls in love with him or something. I feel like I read somewhere that this takes place in virtual reality. I don't know if I understood that right, but I think so. And I think I read somewhere that it takes place in like a historical setting of like the virtual reality. And that sounds very interesting. Like I'm very interested in that. Also, apparently this is sort of like a commentary on the tech industry, and as someone who works in tech, I think that could be very interesting. Next, we have Flashlight, which I've also never heard of, and I don't think I've seen this before. It's about this 10-year-old girl who is out walking one day, and something happens to her father. I think a wave takes him away or something. And because of that, the girl ends up living with her mother, and it seems like both of the parents have kind of complicated backgrounds, and the story is about how the daughter and the mother deal with the grief of having lost the father, although I can't really tell if he's dead or if they even know that he's dead or really what happened to him. It says it spans over times and characters though, so it seems like we're in different times and we meet a lot of different characters, and usually I do quite like those kinds of books, so if any of you have read this and liked it, I would love to know. Then we have Dominion, which again is historical fiction, and I don't think I've seen this one before. It's set in a small town in Mississippi where there's this reverend who has his fingers in all the pies in this little community. And him and his wife have 5 boys. And I think the story is about something that the youngest boy does that sends a shock wave through this little community. I read that the story is told through the perspective of the women who love these 2 men though, so the Reverend and the son, and the story is told from like the women around them, and that does sound very interesting. I will say the cover is not doing a lot for me, but maybe I should try it out because the story sounds really interesting. The next cover is also not doing a lot for me. It's The Benefactors, but again, the story does sound intriguing. It's set in Belfast, and it follows these 3 women who are very different from each other, but they're all mothers, and they all have sons who are 18 years old. And they sort of come together when these boys are accused of sexually assaulting one of their friends, and these mothers have to sort of come together. I'm very curious as to how these women deal with this, and I just think it's an interesting perspective to tell this kind of story, so I'm interested in that. And that also there is something like a certain quality to books set in Ireland that I can't really put my finger on, but that I really like, so that makes me even more intrigued to read it. Then we have another historical fiction book. It's The Mercy Step, and this says that it follows this main character who's born into a very chaotic family where there isn't really room for her, and her siblings don't really understand her. Her mother gives all of her attention to the church, and her father seems to be not so great. It seems like the family is sort of at the mercy of his whims. And this main character, she sort of recedes into herself in a way. She loves reading. She has like a faithful toy that she loves, and she has a really wild imagination, and this is how she escapes. But then of course you can only escape so much into those things, and that's what happens when things come to a head in the family. It sounds interesting, but it's not one of those I'm dying to read necessarily. Maybe I'll look up some reviews again and see what other people think. Moving on, we have The Others, which is set in 1989 in a small Baltic city in East Germany. And I didn't read that much into this one. I came across something about us following 3 young people and they end up in a love triangle. And I'm just like, I don't really know. The setting and the time period does sound interesting, but I think this is sort of like a romance book. I don't really know. It doesn't really look like one. So I'm wondering if it's like romance leaning into literary fiction. But just what I read about the book didn't like interest me all that much. Next up is Kingfisher, and I read the blurb for this one, and I don't know if I'm really grasping what this is about. It says it's about an academic who becomes infatuated with his colleague who is a poet, and I think the story is just about that. I don't know if I'm really interested in this one, but I feel like it's just because I'm not understanding what the book is really about. So maybe if I read some, I don't know, another blurb or something, I will like get it, but I'm not immediately interested, but I don't know. Maybe it's good. For this next one, I have seen this cover around. It's Heart the Lover, and I am interested in this one. It's about, I think, a college student who is in her senior year, and she meets these two other students in her literature class. And these students live off of campus. They live in a professor's house, but the professor is on sabbatical, so he's not there. And it's this beautiful, elegant house, and she is basically invited into their world, and things get a little complicated. Actually, I think maybe they end up in a triangle as well. I know I just said that I wasn't interested in that other book, but in this one I might be interested in it. I think it's the academic setting that does it for me because I love that so much in books, and that might like do it for me, so I think I might have to try this one. I haven't seen any reviews for it or anything, but maybe I should look some up. But anything like an academic setting, I'm always just immediately interested in. Then we have Audition, which is one of those books where I feel like, based on the blurb, it seems like it's a little bit experimental, which it's not always my favorite thing, so I don't know if I'm really interested in this one. But it says it's about two people who meet in a restaurant in Manhattan, and one is like a successful woman, and I think maybe she's an actress, and the other is like a younger man who is like young enough to be her son, and he's a little bit of trouble. And it says that like throughout the book there are these competing narratives that sort of rewrite our understanding of their roles. And I think maybe this sounds a little bit too experimental for me, but if any of you have read it, I would like to hear what you've thought. I don't know what the writing is like or anything, and maybe it could be interesting, but I always feel a little wary of experimental books because I usually don't really like them. We're nearing the end of the list now. Next we have A Guardian and a Thief, which is actually like literary fiction dystopia, which is interesting. It's set in a near future India where there's all of this flooding and famine, and we meet a woman, her daughter, and her elderly father who are just about to get out of this place. They get like their papers to go to America. And then throughout the night, like right before they're about to go, those papers get stolen, which means that they can't leave. And obviously, that sounds super stressful. I think we follow these characters over the span of a week as they are trying to find this thief and get their papers back. And I think it sounds very interesting. I really like dystopian books, especially when they lean sort of towards literary fiction. And I don't read them that often, but usually I remember all of the dystopian books that I've read because they make such an impact on me. And I think the setting of this and everything sounds very interesting, so I'm definitely adding this to my TBR. Second to last, we have The Best of Everything. And I haven't heard of this book, but I've heard of this author, I think. And the story is about this woman who likes having her whole life mapped out. She's getting married and she's planned her honeymoon and she's ready to like settle down. But then, I think right before the wedding, her fiance's friend turns up at her door and says, the wedding is off, you're not going to see your fiance, there's no time to like say goodbye to him. I don't know where he went, but he's gone. And then I think the main character ends up having a baby with the guy who comes to her door, or something like that. They have a child, and the son becomes like the main character's main priority, but then she's also plagued by knowing about this other child who's living a few streets down and who seems to not have a mother. And I think the story is about her maybe getting involved or struggling with if she should get involved, something like that. I don't really know. Maybe I'm not totally understanding what the story is about. It sounds interesting, but not necessarily like something I would love to read, so I don't really know about this one. Lastly, we have A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing. And The title of this one I really like. It's so weird, but I really like it. And I also really like the cover. The story in here is about this woman whose father has been gone for 11 years. I think he just left one day and didn't come back, but then he comes back, a much older man, and he's very fragile, and he's desperate to tell his daughter about his past, which starts off, I think, with him being like a part of the Cultural Revolution. He was like a guard, and it ends with him telling her about this prophecy, which I think is about her. And while he's telling her all of these stories, I think she starts getting all of these like strange visions or something. It sounds a little weird, but I'm interested in this one. I think this blend of like historical fiction and magical realism can be really interesting, and I've read some other books where I've really liked that. And I just think it sounds just strange enough for me that I could really like it, although I don't really know. Again, maybe I should try to find it and read like the first bit or something, but yeah, I really like the title of this one for some reason. Like it just hits me. That was the last book though. Those were all the books on this year's long list. And to summarize, I think the ones that I'm most interested in, maybe I'll just put up like pictures of them here so you can see them. Like those are the ones that I'm most interested in and that I'm adding to my TBR. And this is why I like following this prize so much, because I always feel like it's such an interesting mix of books and I always find something that I'm interested in and that I would like to read. I don't really need to add more books to my TBR, but you know, I always want to read so much and I have so little time. I'd love to know if you have read any of the books on the long list though and what you thought, or if you're interested in reading them, which ones are you interested in and why? Tell me all about it in the comments. I'm excited to see the short list and what makes it to the short list. Occasionally, like, the short list will make me want to read a book that I wasn't interested in when I saw the long list, so we'll see if that happens. But I think the short list is coming out in April, like end of April or something. So maybe I should try to read a couple of the books before then, but we'll see. Anyways, that was everything I had for you today. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!